In the vast expanse of the galaxy, where civilizations rise and fall like distant stars, there exists a universal truth that every species learns too late: never underestimate the prey that refuses to stay hunted. The Kithera were masters of the hunt, apex predators whose very existence revolved around the thrill of tracking sentient beings across star systems. For millennia, they had perfected their craft, turning the pursuit of intelligent life into an art form that brought them both pleasure and prestige among the galactic community. Their sleek vessels could follow quantum signatures across impossible distances, their neural networks could predict behavioral patterns of any species they encountered, and their patience was legendary. When they first detected the strange bipedal creatures from a small blue world in the Orion Arm, the Kithera leadership convened in excitement. Here was a species that had barely achieved faster-than-light travel, yet showed remarkable adaptability and an unusual tendency toward unpredictable behavior. The humans, as they called themselves, seemed perfect for the hunt. What the Kithera didn't realize was that they had just selected the one species in the galaxy that had spent its entire evolutionary history being both predator and prey simultaneously. They had chosen to hunt the descendants of persistence hunters who had once tracked mammoths across ice ages, the children of survivors who had clawed their way to the top of their planet's food chain not through strength or natural weapons, but through sheer, bloody-minded refusal to give up. The hunt began as it always did, with careful observation and meticulous planning. But, somewhere between the first probe and the final strike, something went terribly wrong for the Kithera. The humans didn't just run or hide or fight back in expected ways. They did something that no prey species had ever done before. They adapted. They learned. And, then, they turned the tables. This is the story of how the galaxy's greatest hunters became the hunted, and how humanity proved that sometimes, the most dangerous predator is the one that doesn't look like a predator at all. The obsidian halls of the Kithera hunting vessel Silent Talon hummed with anticipation as Huntmaster ZYXTHAC studied the holographic display before him. The three-dimensional representation of the Sol system rotated slowly, each celestial body highlighted with detailed atmospheric and gravitational data. His forearms moved in practiced precision across the control interface, zooming in on the third planet from the star. Earth. Such an unremarkable name for what appeared to be an unremarkable world. Yet the preliminary scans had revealed something that made ZYXTHAC's hunting hearts race with excitement. This small blue world harbored not just life, but intelligent life that had recently achieved interstellar capability. The species called themselves humans, and initial observations suggested they possessed that perfect combination of intelligence and vulnerability that made for the most satisfying hunts. Huntmaster, came the melodic voice of his first tracker, Velnara, her scale form bowing with the traditional gesture of respect. The long-range biological scans are complete. The target species shows remarkable diversity for such a young civilization. ZYXTHAC's primary eyes remained fixed on the display while his secondary eyes turned toward Velnara. The Kithera had evolved on a world where being able to track multiple threats simultaneously meant the difference between survival and becoming someone else's meal. Now, ironically, they were the apex predators of the galaxy, and that evolutionary advantage served them well in their chosen profession. Elaborate, ZYXTHAC commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had successfully concluded 47 hunts across the galaxy. Each one had been different, each species presenting unique challenges that had honed his skills to razor sharpness. Velnara gestured, and the holographic display shifted to show biological data streams. DNA sequences, neural pathway maps, and physiological breakdowns cascaded through the air in ribbons of light. They are remarkably adaptable, Huntmaster. Their genetic diversity is extraordinary for such a relatively small population. More interesting still, they show evidence of having been both predator and prey throughout their evolutionary history. The Huntmaster's interest sharpened. Species that had evolved as both hunters and hunted often provided the most challenging quarry. They possessed survival instincts honed by millions of years of evolutionary pressure, yet they also understood the predator's mind in ways that pure prey species never could. "Show me their recent expansion patterns," ZYXTHAC ordered. The display shifted again, revealing humanity's tentative steps into space. Small colonies on nearby worlds, mining operations on asteroids, research stations orbiting gas giants. It was a familiar pattern that the Kithera had observed countless times before. A young species taking its first hesitant steps into the vast ocean of space, unaware of the predators that swam in those dark waters. They've established 17 colonial outposts in the past 50 of their years, Velnara reported. Most are resource extraction operations, but several appear to be purely research-based. They're curious about their universe, which makes them predictable in some ways. ZYXTHAC nodded approvingly. Curiosity was both a strength and a weakness in prey species. It drove them to explore and expand, making them easier to track across vast distances. But it also meant they were constantly learning, constantly adapting to new situations. The key was to begin the hunt before they learned enough to become truly dangerous. What about their military capabilities? ZYXTHAC asked, though he expected little threat from such a young species. The Kithara had been perfecting their hunting techniques for over 3,000 years. Their technology was so advanced that most species never even knew they were being hunted until the final moment. Primitive but evolving rapidly came the response from tactical analyst Corven, whose expertise lay in assessing the combat potential of target species. They still rely heavily on chemical propulsion and kinetic weapons, though they've begun experimenting with directed energy systems. Their response times are slow by galactic standards, but they show unusual creativity in their tactical approaches. The hunt master's attention was caught by that last observation. Creativity and tactical thinking could be either a significant advantage or a dangerous liability when hunting a species. Predictable enemies could be countered with established protocols, but creative ones required constant adaptation. Define unusual creativity, ZYXTHAC demanded. Corven activated another display, showing recordings from human military exercises and historical conflicts. They have a saying, necessity is the mother of invention. When faced with superior force or technology, they don't simply retreat or surrender. They adapt their existing resources in unexpected ways. Look at this. The hologram showed a space battle between two human factions, one clearly outgunned and outmaneuvered. Instead of accepting defeat, the losing side had improvised a solution using civilian cargo vessels loaded with industrial explosives, turning them into massive guided missiles that devastated the superior fleet. Interesting, ZYXTHAC mused. They're willing to sacrifice significant resources for tactical advantage. That suggests either desperation or a fundamentally different approach to warfare than most species we've encountered. There's more, Hunt Master, Corven continued. Their history is filled with examples of smaller, weaker forces defeating larger, better equipped enemies through unconventional tactics. They seem to view asymmetrical warfare not as a last resort, but as a valid strategic doctrine. This information painted a more complex picture of humanity than ZYXTHAC had initially expected. Most species, when faced with superior force, followed predictable patterns: flight, hiding, or direct confrontation. If humans genuinely embraced unpredictable tactics as a matter of course, they might prove more challenging than anticipated. But that only made the hunt more exciting. What about their social structure? ZYXTHAC asked, turning his attention to social analyst Thymara. Understanding how a species organized itself was crucial for predicting behavior patterns during a hunt. Highly fragmented but surprisingly cooperative when faced with external threats, Thymara reported. They maintain thousands of separate political entities on their homeworld, yet they've managed to coordinate their space exploration efforts with remarkable efficiency. They have a concept they call unity in diversity that seems to allow them to work together despite fundamental disagreements. ZYXTHAC considered this information carefully. Fragmented societies were typically easier to manipulate and divide during a hunt, but if humans had developed methods for rapid cooperation in crisis situations, that could complicate traditional hunting strategies. Begin Phase 1 observation protocols, ZYXTHAC commanded, settling into his command throne. The throne was carved from the fossilized bone of a creature from his homeworld, a reminder of the natural order where predators ruled and prey served their purpose in the Great Cycle. Around him, his hunting pack moved with practiced efficiency. The Kithara had refined their hunting methodology over millennia, and every member of a hunting pack knew their role perfectly. Phase 1 involved detailed observation and behavioral mapping without direct contact. They would study human migration patterns, communication methods, military responses, and social dynamics before moving to Phase 2. The silent Talon adjusted its position, its cloaking systems rendering it invisible to human detection methods. From their concealed position in the asteroid belt, they could monitor all human activity in the Sol system without risk of discovery. The ship itself was a masterpiece of predatory engineering, designed for extended hunts that could last decades or even centuries. Tracking stations are operational, reported sensor specialist Dalzin. We're monitoring all electromagnetic communications, gravitational disturbances, and quantum signatures within the system. ZYXTAC watched as data streams began flowing across his displays. Human communication networks buzzed with activity as billions of individuals went about their daily lives, unaware that death was studying their every move. It was a familiar sight that never failed to send a thrill of anticipation through his predator's nervous system. Hunt Master, Velnara said, her voice carrying a note of puzzlement. I'm detecting some unusual patterns in their communication networks. Elaborate. They appear to be engaged in constant information sharing on a scale we haven't observed in other species. Millions of simultaneous conversations, data exchanges, and collaborative projects. It's as if their entire civilization is functioning as a single massive information processing network. ZYXTAC studied the communication patterns flowing across his screens. Indeed, the level of information exchange was extraordinary. Most civilizations maintained clear hierarchies with information flowing up and down established channels. But human society seemed to operate more like a neural network, with information flowing in all directions simultaneously. This could be significant, he mused. If they can share information and coordinate responses as efficiently as these patterns suggest, they might adapt to hunting pressure more rapidly than we've calculated. Should we accelerate the hunt timeline? Velnara asked. The Hunt Master considered the question carefully. The traditional Kithara hunt unfolded over extended periods, allowing the hunters to savor every moment of the experience. Rushing the process reduced both the pleasure and the effectiveness of the hunt. But, if the prey possessed unusual adaptive capabilities, there was wisdom in moving more quickly. Maintain standard protocols for now, ZYXTAC decided. But, prepare contingency plans for acceleration if their adaptation rate exceeds our projections. I want continuous analysis of their technological development and military capabilities. Yes, Hunt Master. As the crew settled into their observation routines, ZYXTAC allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. This hunt promised to be one of the more interesting challenges he had faced in recent decades. The humans were proving more complex than typical prey species, which only added to the eventual triumph he would experience when they finally fell to his superior hunting skills. The display showed Earth rotating peacefully in its orbit, its surface teeming with billions of humans going about their daily activities. They built their cities, raised their young, explored their universe, and dreamed their small dreams, never suspecting that ancient predators watched from the darkness between worlds. But, somewhere in the back of ZYXTAC's mind, a small voice of caution whispered a warning that he dismissed as unnecessary paranoia. After all, he was the predator here. They were merely the prey. The hunt had begun. 3 months into the observation period, Huntmaster ZYXTAC found himself increasingly fascinated by the complexity of human behavior. What had initially appeared to be a straightforward hunting opportunity was revealing layers of sophistication that challenged many of his assumptions about young species. Huntmaster, called Navigation Specialist Cree Dunn from her station, I'm detecting movement in the outer system. One of the human exploration vessels is adjusting course toward the edge of our monitoring zone. ZYXTAC's primary attention shifted to the tactical display, where a small blue icon represented the human ship moving through space with the characteristic energy signature of their primitive fusion drives. The vessel was designated UES Discovery according to their intercepted communications, and it appeared to be on a routine survey mission to the system's outer planets. Analysis? ZYXTAC requested. Standard exploration pattern, Corven reported from the tactical station. They're conducting detailed scans of the gas giants and their moons. Based on their current trajectory, they'll pass within 50,000 kilometers of our position in approximately 16 hours. The Hunt Master considered his options. The Silent Talon's cloaking systems were more than adequate to avoid detection by primitive human sensors, but there was always some risk when prey passed so close to a hunting vessel. Standard protocol called for maintaining maximum distance from target species during Phase 1 observations. But standard protocols had been developed for typical prey species. Humans were proving to be anything but typical. Velnara, ZYX called to his first tracker. What have you learned about their sensor capabilities? They're more sophisticated than we initially calculated, she admitted, her secondary eyes focusing on her data streams while her primary eyes remained fixed on the huntmaster. Their passive detection systems are particularly advanced. They've developed techniques for identifying gravitational anomalies that could theoretically detect a cloaked vessel under certain circumstances. This information was troubling. The Kythera cloaking technology worked by bending electromagnetic radiation and masking thermal signatures, but it couldn't eliminate gravitational effects entirely. If humans had developed gravitational sensors sensitive enough to detect the mass of a hunting vessel, they might pose more of a threat than anticipated. Recommendation? ZYX asked. We could withdraw to a safer distance, Velnara suggested. Or we could use this as an opportunity to test their detection capabilities under controlled conditions. The second option was tempting. Understanding the full extent of human sensor technology would be valuable intelligence for later phases of the hunt. But it also involved unnecessary risk. Vimara, ZYX called to the social analyst. If they detect an anomaly, how likely are they to investigate rather than dismiss it as sensor error? The social analyst consulted her behavioral models before responding. Given their demonstrated curiosity and their systematic approach to exploration, I estimate a 73% probability that they would investigate any unexplained readings. They appear to possess a cultural drive to understand phenomena they encounter. That settled the matter. The risk of discovery was too high to justify the potential intelligence gain. Done, plot a withdrawal course. Take us to the far side of the largest asteroid cluster. We'll maintain observation from a safer distance. But, as the Silent Talon began its withdrawal maneuver, something unexpected happened. The human exploration vessel suddenly altered course, moving in a direction that would intersect their new position. Status report, ZYX demanded. Unknown, Done replied, her voice carrying a note of confusion that was rare among the typically confident Kythera crew. Their course change occurred simultaneously with our movement, but there's no indication they detected us. Could be coincidence, Corven suggested, though his tone indicated he didn't believe it himself. ZYX studied the tactical display with growing unease. In thousands of years of hunting, the Kythera had encountered coincidences that defied statistical probability, but this seemed to stretch credibility. The human vessel was now on a direct intercept course, despite having no apparent reason to change direction. Full stop, ZYX ordered. Let them pass and see what they do. The Silent Talon drifted silently in space, its crew watching as the UES Discovery approached their position. The human vessel was primitive by Kythera standards, little more than a collection of habitat modules and instrument packages strapped to a fusion drive. But it moved with purpose, its sensors actively scanning the space around it. They're conducting a detailed sweep of this region, Delzin reported from the sensor station. Energy signatures indicate they're using multiple detection methods simultaneously. What are they looking for? Vimara wondered aloud. The answer came through intercepted human communications. The voice that emerged from the speakers was female, speaking the primary human language with the crisp precision of a trained explorer. Discovery Control, this is Commander Sarah Chen reporting. We're detecting gravitational anomalies in this sector that don't match any known stellar phenomena. The readings are consistent with a massive object that isn't showing up on our visual or electromagnetic scans. Another voice responded from what the Kythera had identified as Human Command Center on Mars. Copy that, Discovery. Could be a rogue planet or dark matter concentration. Recommend full spectrum analysis. Already on it, Control. But I want to note that the gravitational readings have some unusual characteristics. The mass distribution doesn't match natural phenomena. If I didn't know better, I'd say we were looking at something artificial. ZYX felt his hunting hearts accelerate. The human commander was demonstrating exactly the kind of intuitive thinking that made prey species dangerous. She had detected the gravitational signature of his hunting vessel and, instead of dismissing it as a sensor error or natural phenomenon, she was treating it as a potential artificial construct.
Hunt Master, Velnara said quietly, we should withdraw immediately. But ZYXTHAC found himself reluctant to retreat.
This was an unprecedented opportunity to observe human problem solving in real time.
How would they react when faced with evidence of something beyond their understanding? Would they flee? Would they investigate cautiously? Would they call for military backup?
The human ship moved closer, its sensors probing the space around the cloaked hunting vessel with increasing precision. On the communications channel, Commander Chen continued her report.
Control, I'm getting some interesting readings here.
The gravitational signature is consistent with a vessel approximately 800 meters in length, but there's nothing on visual or radar.
Either we're dealing with some kind of natural phenomenon that perfectly mimics an artificial construct, or there's something out here that doesn't want to be seen.
The Mars Control Center responded with what sounded like skepticism.
Discovery, recommend you download all sensor data and return to base for analysis. Could be equipment malfunction.
Negative, Control. All systems are operating normally, and I'm getting consistent readings across multiple sensor arrays.
Whatever this is, it's real. ZYXTHAC was impressed despite himself.
The human commander was demonstrating the kind of persistence and analytical thinking that marked a natural predator. She had identified an anomaly, correctly interpreted its implications, and was refusing to be dissuaded by her superior's skepticism. She's using active sonar now, Dalzin reported. If she gets much closer, she might be able to map our hull configuration despite the cloaking. This was becoming dangerous.
Active sonar pulses could potentially reveal details about the hunting vessel that would confirm its artificial nature. But ZYXTHAC found himself curious about how far the human would push her investigation. Hunt Master, Velnara said more urgently, we need to withdraw now.
But, before ZYXTHAC could give the order, the human ship did something completely unexpected. Instead of continuing to approach, it suddenly backed away to a respectful distance and began broadcasting on multiple frequencies. Unknown vessel, came Commander Chen's voice, this is the United Earthship Discovery. We've detected your presence and mean no harm. If you're able to receive this transmission, please respond. The bridge of the silent Talon fell silent. In 3,000 years of hunting, no prey species had ever detected a cloaked Kythera vessel and, then, attempted to initiate peaceful contact. The standard response was either flight or aggressive investigation.
She knows we're here, Vimara breathed.
She's trying to make contact.
Impossible, Corvin protested.
Their technology isn't advanced enough to penetrate our cloaking systems.
But, the evidence was undeniable.
The human commander had not only detected their presence but had correctly identified their vessel as artificial and potentially inhabited.
More impressive still, her first instinct had been to attempt communication rather than to flee or attack.
The human transmission continued.
We understand that you may have reasons for remaining concealed. We respect that.
But, we're explorers, not conquerors.
If you're willing to make contact, we'd be honored to meet you.
ZYXTHAC studied the tactical display, his mind racing through implications. This changed everything about the hunt. Prey species that could detect Kythera hunting vessels posed entirely new categories of challenge. But prey species that responded to the unknown with curiosity rather than fear were almost unheard of.
Hunt Master, Velnara said, how do we proceed? It was an excellent question.
Standard hunting protocols had no provision for this situation. The Kythera had developed their techniques around the assumption that they would remain undetected until they chose to reveal themselves.
Having prey actively attempt to make contact with a hunting vessel was so far outside normal parameters that there were no established guidelines. We withdraw, ZYXTHAC finally decided. Full retreat to the edge of the system. We need to reassess everything we thought we knew about this species.
But, as the silent Talon began its withdrawal, the human ship made one final transmission that sent chills through the hunting pack.
We know you're leaving, Commander Chen said. We won't follow. But, we want you to know that we're aware you're out there. And, we're ready when you're ready to talk.
The implications of that statement hung in the air as the Kithara hunting vessel fled into the darkness between worlds. For the first time in 3,000 years, the hunters had become the hunted. And they were beginning to realize that their chosen prey might be far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. Analysis of the encounter, ZYX demanded once they had reached a safe distance. The human commander demonstrated several unexpected capabilities, Velnara reported. Advanced pattern recognition, intuitive thinking, courage under uncertainty, and, most significantly, a preference for communication over confrontation when faced with the unknown. That last trait could be either a weakness or a strength, Corven observed. It might make them vulnerable to manipulation, or it might make them capable of forming unexpected alliances. Thymara was studying her behavioral models with obvious confusion. Huntmaster, I need to revise all of our predictions about human response patterns. This encounter falls so far outside normal parameters that I'm not sure our existing models are valid. ZYX nodded grimly. The hunt was proving more challenging than anticipated, but that only made the eventual victory sweeter. However, they would need to adapt their strategies significantly. Begin Phase 2 preparations, he ordered. But modify the protocols. We're no longer dealing with typical prey. 6 months had passed since the encounter with the UES Discovery, and Huntmaster ZYX found himself facing a situation no Kithara hunter had ever encountered before. Instead of proceeding with their traditional hunting phases, his pack was engaged in an escalating game of cat and mouse that was proving far more complex than anything in their ancient protocols. The humans had not simply returned to their normal activities after detecting the cloaked hunting vessel. Instead, they had fundamentally altered their approach to space exploration and defense in ways that suggested they understood exactly what kind of threat they might be facing. Show me the latest intelligence, ZYX commanded as he stood before the main tactical display in the Silent Talon's command center. Velnara activated the holographic projections with obvious reluctance. Over the past months, her reports had grown increasingly troubling, and today's update promised to be no different. Huntmaster, the humans have made significant changes to their operational patterns. They're no longer sending out single exploration vessels. All missions now involve flotillas of 3 to 5 ships, each equipped with enhanced sensor packages. The display showed the current disposition of human vessels throughout the Sol system. Where once there had been scattered individual ships conducting routine surveys and cargo runs, there were now coordinated formations moving in carefully planned patterns that provided mutual support and overlapping sensor coverage. They've also implemented what they call ghost protocols, Velnara continued. Random course changes, false destination broadcasts, and coordinated sensor sweeps designed to detect cloaked vessels. They're actively hunting for us, Huntmaster. ZYX studied the movement patterns with growing unease. The humans had effectively turned their entire spacefaring fleet into a distributed detection network. Any attempt to approach their colonies or supply lines would now involve running a gauntlet of overlapping sensors operated by crews that were specifically watching for gravitational anomalies. What about their military capabilities? ZYX asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Corven stepped forward with his own disturbing report. They've accelerated their weapons development by at least 2 centuries, Huntmaster. They're field testing energy weapons, improved missile systems, and something they call distributed defense networks around their colonies. The tactical display shifted to show defensive installations that had sprouted around human settlements like metallic flowers. Weapon platforms, sensor arrays, and communication relays created overlapping fields of coverage that would make any direct assault extremely costly. But, more concerning, Corven continued, they'd begun developing what they call asymmetric response doctrines specifically designed to counter technologically superior opponents. Explain. They're assuming any alien contact will involve species with significantly advanced technology. So instead of trying to match our capabilities directly, they're developing strategies based on unpredictability, rapid adaptation, and what they call acceptable losses. ZYX's secondary eyes focused on the tactical analyst while his primary eyes remained fixed on the display. Define acceptable losses. They've calculated that they can afford to lose up to 60% of their space-based assets if it means gaining tactical intelligence about an alien threat. They're prepared to sacrifice entire fleets to learn our capabilities and weaknesses. This was deeply disturbing news. Most prey species valued individual survival above all else, making them reluctant to engage in tactics that involved significant casualties. But humans seemed to understand the concept of strategic sacrifice in ways that suggested a fundamentally different approach to survival. There's more, Corvan added. They've begun what they called deep space monitoring stations. Hidden sensor platforms scattered throughout the outer system, designed to track any vessels entering or leaving solar space. The implications were staggering. The humans had essentially turned their entire star system into a trap. Any hunting vessel attempting to operate within solar space would be detected, tracked, and potentially engaged by coordinated forces that were prepared to accept massive casualties to achieve their objectives. How is this possible? Vimara demanded from her position at the Social Analysis Station. 6 months ago, they were a fragmented collection of competing political entities. Now they're operating as a unified military force. Show me their communication networks, ZYX ordered. The display transformed into a web of information flows that spanned the entire system. Unlike the chaotic chatter they had observed during their initial surveillance, human communications now followed clear hierarchical patterns with obvious military efficiency. But underlying the official channels was something that made ZYX's hunting instincts scream warnings. They're using their civilian information networks as a secondary military communication system, Vimara explained. Entertainment broadcasts, commercial transactions, social media platforms, they've turned their entire civilization into a distributed intelligence network. Vimara highlighted specific data streams. They're sharing tactical information, sensor readings, and strategic analyses through channels that appear to be routine civilian activities. A recipe exchange might actually be coordinates for defensive positions. A music broadcast could contain encrypted sensor data. The sophistication of this approach was breathtaking. The humans had created a communication system that was virtually impossible to disrupt because it was integrated into every aspect of their society. Destroying their military networks would have minimal impact on their ability to coordinate resistance. Huntmaster, came a new voice from the communications station. Sensor specialist Dalzin was monitoring human transmissions with obvious agitation. You need to hear this. The bridge speakers crackled to life with a transmission from Earth's primary military command center. The voice was male, speaking with the calm authority of someone accustomed to making life and death decisions. All vessels and installations, this is General Morrison, United Earth Defense Command. As of today, we are implementing Operation Looking Glass. All civilian and military personnel are to maintain enhanced vigilance for signs of alien presence. Remember, we know they're out there, and we know they're watching us. Stay alert, stay alive, and trust your instincts. The transmission continued with detailed instructions for reporting suspicious sensor readings, coordinating with nearby vessels, and implementing emergency protocols. But what struck ZYX most forcefully was the underlying assumption in the general's words. The humans weren't hoping to make peaceful contact or trying to hide from potential alien threats. They were preparing for war. They know we're hunters, ZYX realized. Somehow, they've concluded that any alien species capable of remaining hidden for extended periods represents a hostile threat. Their logic is sound, Corvan admitted grudgingly. Peaceful species would have announced their presence immediately. Only predatory species would observe from concealment. This was the nightmare scenario that no Kithara hunting manual had ever addressed. The prey species had not only detected their presence but had correctly interpreted their intentions. Worse, they were responding with coordinated military action based on the assumption that they were dealing with hostile aliens. Options? ZYX asked his senior staff. We could withdraw entirely, Velnara suggested. Declare the hunt a failure and seek easier prey elsewhere in the galaxy. The idea was tempting, but it went against every instinct ZYX had developed over his long career. The Kithara did not flee from challenges. They adapted, overcame, and conquered. Alternative options? We could accelerate to Phase 3, Corvan suggested. Direct military engagement before they complete their defensive preparations. Analysis of our chances in direct confrontation? Corvan hesitated before responding.
Against their current capabilities, we would likely achieve victory with acceptable losses. But they're developing new technologies and tactics at an unprecedented rate. Every day we delay reduces our probability of success. Thymara interjected with her own assessment. Huntmaster, I must point out that the humans are displaying behavioral patterns we've never encountered in prey species. They're not just adapting to our presence, they're actively trying to understand our psychology and predict our actions. Evidence? Their defensive deployments show clear understanding of Kithara hunting methodology. They've positioned their assets to force us into the kind of direct confrontation that our training teaches us to avoid. They're trying to negate our advantages while maximizing their own strengths. The implications of this analysis were deeply unsettling. It suggested that the humans possessed strategic thinking capabilities that rivaled those of seasoned Kithara hunters. They weren't just reacting to threats, they were anticipating and preparing for specific tactical scenarios. There's something else, Dalzin reported from the sensor station. I'm detecting unusual energy signatures from several of their research facilities. They appear to be working on technologies that don't match any known human capabilities. Elaborate. The energy patterns suggest they're experimenting with exotic matter manipulation and quantum field generators. If they're developing what I think they're developing, they might be working on their own cloaking technology. The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. If the humans successfully developed cloaking capabilities, the fundamental advantage that had made Kithara hunting possible for millennia would be neutralized. Even worse, a species with humanity's demonstrated tactical creativity and willingness to accept casualties would be virtually unstoppable if they could operate from concealment. Timeline for their technological development? ZYXTHAC demanded. Unknown, but given their current rate of progress, I estimate they could have functional cloaking systems within 1 to 2 years. That settled the matter. The hunt could not continue along traditional lines. The humans had proven themselves too dangerous to be allowed to continue developing their capabilities. Phase 3 would have to be implemented immediately, despite the risks. Begin preparation for direct engagement, ZYXTHAC commanded. But modify all protocols to account for their enhanced defensive capabilities and tactical sophistication. Yes, Huntmaster, his staff responded in unison. But, as they began planning their assault, none of them noticed the small human monitoring probe that had been following them at extreme range for the past 3 weeks. Commander Sarah Chen's encounter with the cloaked vessel had been reported through appropriate channels, and Earth's military leadership had responded by implementing the most ambitious intelligence operation in human history. The hunters were still being hunted, and they didn't even know it. One more thing, ZYXTHAC added as an afterthought. I want continuous monitoring of all human communications. If they're as intelligent as they appear to be, they may try to turn our assault into a trap. It was a wise precaution, but it came 6 months too late. The humans had been preparing for exactly this scenario since the moment they detected the alien presence in their system. And they had advantages that the Kithara couldn't even imagine. The real hunt was just beginning. The assault began at 0347 Universal Earth time on a Tuesday that would be remembered as the day humanity stopped being prey. Huntmaster ZYXTHAC had chosen his moment carefully. The human defensive formations were spread thin across multiple patrol sectors, and intelligence indicated that their main battle fleet was conducting exercises near Jupiter. It should have been the perfect opportunity to strike a decisive blow against the colony on Mars before the humans could coordinate an effective response. The Silent Talon dropped its cloak as it emerged from the asteroid belt, its weapons systems charging with the distinctive energy signature that had terrorized civilizations across the galaxy for 3 millennia. Around it, 4 additional Kithara hunting vessels materialized from the darkness, their sleek forms cutting through space with predatory grace. All vessels report ready for Phase 3 engagement, Velnara announced from her tactical station. Estimated time to Mars orbital space, 17 minutes. ZYXTHAC studied the tactical display with satisfaction. 5 hunting vessels against a primitive human colony should be more than adequate to demonstrate Kithara superiority. Once the Mars colony was destroyed, the humans would understand the futility of resistance and submit to the traditional hunt conclusion. But, as the Kithara formation accelerated toward its target, the first signs appeared that this would not be a typical assault.
Hunt Master, Dalzin called from the sensor station, her voice carrying a note of confusion. I'm detecting massive energy signatures throughout the system. The humans appear to be activating some kind of network. The tactical display suddenly filled with new contacts as human assets throughout the Sol system came online simultaneously. What had appeared to be routine mining platforms revealed themselves as heavily armed battle stations. Cargo vessels shed their civilian disguises to expose military-grade weapon systems. Research facilities transformed into fortress-like installations bristling with defensive arrays. Impossible, Corvin breathed. How did they hide so many military assets? The answer came through intercepted human communications as General Morrison's voice filled the bridge of the silent Talon. Operation Looking Glass is now active. All units, implement Doctrine 7. Remember, they've been watching us for months, but we've been watching them too. ZYXTHAC felt his hunting hearts race as the implications became clear. The humans had known about the surveillance all along. Everything they had observed, the defensive preparations, the fleet movements, the technological developments had been carefully orchestrated to present a false picture of human capabilities. Energy spike detected, Dalzin reported urgently. Something's charging weapons systems from the direction of Earth. The main display shifted to show a massive structure emerging from behind Earth's moon. It was clearly artificial but, unlike anything in the Kithara database of known technologies. The construction was enormous, easily dwarfing the largest Kithara hunting vessels, and it was moving with impossible speed. What is that thing? Velnara demanded. Their question was answered by a transmission from the mysterious vessel. The voice that emerged from the speakers was female, speaking with calm professionalism despite the revolutionary nature of what she was announcing. Alien vessels, this is Admiral Sarachin commanding the UES Defiance. You are trespassing in human space and threatening human lives. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences. Sarah Chen. ZYXTHAC remembered the name from their first encounter months ago. The commander who had detected their cloaked vessel had apparently been promoted and given command of whatever massive ship was now bearing down on their formation. Huntmaster, Corvin said urgently, that vessel is using some kind of exotic propulsion system. It's accelerating at rates that should be impossible for any ship that size. Weapons analysis? Unknown technology. Energy readings are off the scale. I'm detecting quantum field manipulations and exotic matter signatures that don't match anything in our databases. ZYXTHAC stared at the approaching human vessel with growing unease. How had a primitive species developed technology that surpassed Kithara capabilities? It should have been impossible given their observed development level just months earlier. Admiral Chen, ZYXTHAC transmitted, deciding to attempt communication before resorting to direct combat. I am Huntmaster ZYXTHAC of the Kithara hunting fleet. You have impressed us with your resourcefulness, but you cannot hope to match our superior weapons and experience. The response came with maddening human confidence. Huntmaster, you've made two critical mistakes. First, you assumed we were prey. Second, you assumed we were alone. Before ZYXTHAC could process the implications of that statement, space around the Kithara formation erupted with new contacts. Ships were emerging from cloaked positions throughout the asteroid belt, not just human vessels, but craft with energy signatures that matched no known civilization. Huntmaster, Thymara called from her station, her voice tight with suppressed panic. I'm detecting vessels from at least 12 different species. They're all moving to support the human fleet. The tactical display showed an impossible sight, a coalition fleet of dozens of ships from multiple civilizations, all converging on the Kithara hunting pack. Some of the vessels showed technology levels that exceeded even Kithara capabilities. How is this possible? Velnara demanded. The humans were a newly spacefaring species. They couldn't have formed galactic alliances. Admiral Chen's voice provided the answer with what sounded disturbingly like amusement. You're not the first hunters to visit our system, Huntmaster. Over the past year, we've encountered 7 different species that thought humans would make easy prey. Turns out, most of them were refugees from predators just like you. The implications hit ZYXTHAC like a physical blow. The humans hadn't just detected and prepared for the Kithara hunt, they had used it as an opportunity to build alliances with other species that had survived Kithara hunts. They had turned their system into a gathering point for the galaxy's survivors. The Veltar contributed their shield technology, Shin continued, clearly enjoying the revelation. The Zephyri shared their cloaking improvements. The Mordun provided those lovely quantum drives you're seeing. Turns out, when you spend 3,000 years terrorizing the galaxy, you create a lot of enemies who are very eager to work together.
ZYXTHAC's mind reeled as he processed this information. The humans hadn't just prepared to resist a Kithara hunt, they had orchestrated the formation of the first anti-Kithara alliance in galactic history.
They had turned their apparent weakness into strength by convincing other species to unite against their common enemy.
Weapons lock detected, Corvan reported. Multiple vessels are targeting our formation.
Evasive maneuvers, ZYXTHAC commanded, but, even as he gave the order, he realized the futility of their situation. The Kithara hunting pack was outnumbered at least 6 to 1, and their opponents included technology that matched or exceeded their own capabilities. Huntmaster, Admiral Chen transmitted, "I'm going to give you one chance to surrender. Your ships will be impounded, your crews will be interrogated, and you'll be held accountable for 3,000 years of murder and terror. But you'll live." The offer of surrender was unprecedented. No prey species had ever been in a position to offer terms to Kithara hunters. The very concept violated everything ZYXTHAC understood about the natural order of the universe. "Never," ZYXTHAC snarled into the transmitter. "The Kithara do not surrender to prey." "Then, you've made your choice," Shen replied with what sounded like genuine sadness. "All units, weapons free. Show them what happens when predators meet persistence hunters." The battle that followed was brief, brutal, and completely one-sided. The Kithara hunting vessels fought with the desperate fury of predators suddenly finding themselves at the bottom of the food chain, but they were overwhelmed by sheer numbers and superior coordination. The coalition fleet moved like a living organism, each vessel supporting its neighbors while maintaining perfect coordination across multiple species and technology types. It was the kind of seamless cooperation that typically took generations to develop, yet the humans had somehow achieved it in less than a year. Hull breaches on decks 7 through 12, Velnara reported as the silent Talon shuddered under concentrated fire. "We're losing atmospheric pressure throughout the ship. Weapons systems failing," Corvan added. "They're using some kind of adaptive shielding that adjusts to counter our energy signatures." ZYXTHAC watched his formation disintegrate around him as one by one, the other hunting vessels were disabled or destroyed. The humans and their allies fought with ruthless efficiency, targeting propulsion and weapons systems to disable rather than destroy when possible, but showing no mercy to vessels that continued to resist. "Huntmaster," Delzin called urgently, "I'm detecting massive energy buildup from the human flagship. They're charging some kind of weapon I've never seen before." On the main display, the UES Defiance was indeed preparing to fire something that defied all conventional understanding of energy weapons. Exotic matter streams were converging around the ship's bow, creating distortions in spacetime that hurt to look at directly. "This is Admiral Chen," came the final transmission. "Last chance, Huntmaster. Surrender now or discover what humans do to things that threaten their families." ZYXTHAC stared at the approaching energy weapon with the dawning realization that his 3,000-year hunting tradition was about to end. The humans hadn't just survived the hunt, they had turned it into a trap that eliminated the hunters themselves. "All vessels," ZYXTHAC transmitted to his remaining ships, "stand down. Deactivate weapons and prepare for surrender." It was the most difficult order he had ever given, but the alternative was the complete destruction of his hunting pack and the extinction of knowledge that had taken millennia to develop. "Wise choice," Admiral Chan responded. "Marine boarding parties are en route. Resist and you'll be shot. Cooperate and you'll live to see trial." As human and alien boarding craft approached the crippled Kithara vessels, ZYXTHAC found himself contemplating the complete reversal of everything he had believed about the natural order. The prey had become predators, the hunted had become hunters, and the galaxy's most feared species had been defeated by creatures they had dismissed as primitive and weak. But, perhaps most disturbing of all was the realization that the humans had achieved their victory not through superior technology or overwhelming force, but through the one capability the Kithara had never developed, the ability to turn enemies into allies.
The hunt was over.
And, for the first time in 3,000 years, the Kithara had lost. 3 months after their capture, Huntmaster ZYXTHAC found himself in a situation that no Kithara hunter had ever experienced, sitting across from his former prey in what humans called a negotiation room aboard the space station they had designated as their coalition headquarters.
The irony was not lost on him. The station had been constructed from the hulks of destroyed Kithara hunting vessels, their advanced alloys repurposed into a symbol of humanity's new role in the galaxy.
Every surface reminded him of the hunt that had gone so catastrophically wrong.
Admiral Sarah Chen sat across the polished metal table, her expression calm and professional.
Beside her sat representatives from a dozen species that the Kithara had hunted over the centuries. The sight of so many former victims gathered in alliance was perhaps the most disturbing aspect of his current situation. Huntmaster Admiral Chen began, consulting a datapad that undoubtedly contained information about every Kithara hunt conducted in the past 1,000 years. We've reviewed the testimony from your surviving crew members, and we've compiled quite an extensive record of your activities.
ZYXTHAC remained silent.
He had already provided the basic information required under what the humans called the Geneva Conventions, apparently some ancient human agreement about the treatment of prisoners that they had somehow extended to cover interspecies conflicts. The concept of treating captured enemies with dignity was foreign to Kithara culture, but he had to admit that his captors had been scrupulously fair in their treatment of him and his crew. 47 successful hunts, Chen continued. Estimated casualty count of over 3 million sentient beings across 24 star systems. By any measure, that qualifies as genocide on a galactic scale.
The human's voice remained level, but ZYXTHAC could detect the underlying anger.
He had learned to read human emotional cues during his months of captivity, and Sarah Chen was clearly struggling to maintain her professional demeanor while discussing the scope of Kithara atrocities.
However, she continued, we're not here to conduct a war crimes tribunal. We have a more pressing concern. This was unexpected. ZYXTHAC had assumed that his captors would either execute him as a war criminal or keep him in prison indefinitely. The possibility of some other arrangement had never occurred to him. According to our intelligence, Chen said, activating a holographic display that showed a three-dimensional map of the local galactic arm, your hunting pack was just one of hundreds currently operating throughout known space. The Kithara Empire continues to conduct hunts across dozens of star systems, terrorizing civilizations that lack the resources to defend themselves. The display highlighted active Kithara hunting grounds, showing a scope of operations that span thousands of light years. ZYXTHAC was impressed despite himself by the thoroughness of human intelligence gathering. They had somehow compiled more comprehensive information about Kithara operations than most Kithara hunters possessed. We could execute you and your crew, Chen said bluntly. Every species in our coalition has suffered losses to Kithara hunts. They would consider it justice. She paused, allowing the weight of that statement to sink in before continuing. But execution won't save the millions of beings who are currently being hunted by your people. It won't protect the civilizations that haven't yet developed the technology to defend themselves. And it won't end the 3,000-year reign of terror that your empire has inflicted on this galaxy. ZYXTHAC began to understand where this conversation was heading, and the implications filled him with something he had never experienced before, fear for his entire species. You want us to help you hunt the hunters, he said quietly. Exactly.
Chen leaned forward, her eyes fixed on his with uncomfortable intensity.
You know their methods, their technology, their psychology.
You can predict where they'll strike next and how they'll approach their targets. With your cooperation, we can intercept hunting packs before they reach their victims. The proposal was simultaneously logical and horrifying. The humans were asking him to betray everything he had spent his life believing in, to turn against his own kind and help destroy the very foundation of Kithara culture.
And if I refuse? ZYXTHAC asked.
Then, you'll spend the rest of your life in a very comfortable prison while we figure out how to stop your people without your help, Chen replied matter-of-factly. It will take longer and cost more lives, but we'll get there eventually. We've already reverse-engineered most of your technology, and our xenopsychology teams are developing profiles of Kithara hunting behavior. She gestured to one of her companions, a tall, crystalline being that ZYXTAC recognized as a member of the Silix species, one of the first civilizations the Kithara had hunted to near extinction over 1,000 years ago.
Telnash here has some interesting insights into Kithara psychology, Chen continued.
His people survived by developing techniques for predicting hunter behavior. They've been sharing those techniques with our other allies. The Silix representative spoke in a voice like wind chimes, translated by the Coalition's universal communication system.
The Kithara follow patterns established over millennia.
They are creatures of habit, bound by traditions that make them predictable despite their tactical sophistication.
ZYXTAC felt a chill run through his secondary nervous system.
If the Coalition had developed methods for predicting Kithara behavior, they could systematically hunt down every hunting pack in the galaxy. The tables hadn't just been turned, they were being completely rebuilt. "How many hunting packs have you intercepted?" he asked, though he dreaded the answer.
17 in the past 2 months, Chen replied with obvious satisfaction.
The survival rate for targeted civilizations has increased to 93% when we can intervene before the hunt begins. The number was staggering. In just 2 months, the Coalition had prevented more hunting successes than most individual hunters achieved in decades. They weren't just defending themselves, they were systematically dismantling the entire Kithara hunting tradition. "Your people are losing," Chen continued.
"Every successful intervention teaches us more about how you operate. Every captured hunter provides additional intelligence.
Every rescued civilization adds new resources and capabilities to our Coalition."
She activated another display showing the Coalition's expanding membership.
What had begun as an alliance between humans and a handful of refugee species had grown into a massive interstellar organization spanning dozens of systems.
"We're not just stopping hunts anymore," Chen explained.
"We're actively seeking out isolated civilizations and offering them protection and technology in exchange for mutual defense agreements. Every species we recruit makes us stronger and makes your people weaker."
The strategic brilliance of the approach was undeniable.
The humans had identified the fundamental weakness in Kithara strategy, their reliance on isolated, defenseless prey species, and had systematically undermined it by creating networks of mutual protection. "But we're not interested in genocide," Chen continued, her voice taking on a more serious tone.
"We don't want to exterminate the Kithara.
We want to end the hunting tradition and integrate your people into galactic civilization as productive members rather than predators."
This was perhaps the most shocking statement yet.
The humans actually believed that the Kithara could be reformed, that a species that had spent 3 millennia as apex predators could somehow be convinced to abandon their fundamental nature.
"That's impossible," ZYXTAC said. "Hunting is not just what we do, it's what we are. You might as well ask a star to stop burning."
"People can change," Chen replied with conviction that suggested she actually believed it.
"Entire civilizations can evolve beyond their origins. Humans used to be tribal hunters who fought constant wars over territory and resources.
Now we're building interstellar alliances and protecting species we've never even met." She leaned back in her chair, her expression becoming almost philosophical. "The question is whether your people will choose to evolve voluntarily or whether they'll force us to make the choice for them."
The implicit threat was clear. The Coalition had developed the capability to hunt down every Kithara hunting pack in the galaxy.
They could systematically capture or destroy every hunting vessel, every hunting station, every training facility until the Kithara Empire was reduced to isolated fragments incapable of conducting hunts.
"What are you proposing?" ZYXTAC asked. "Help us contact your leadership," Chen said. "Arrange a meeting where we can present terms for ending the hunting tradition.
Your people can transition to new roles as explorers, researchers, or even security consultants for civilizations that want protection from other threats."
"And if they refuse?"
"Then, we'll continue intercepting hunts and capturing hunters until there aren't enough of you left to pose a threat to anyone." Chen's voice remained calm, but there was steel beneath the words.
"We've proven we can do it. The only question is whether your people want to survive the transition."
ZYXTAC stared at the tactical display showing the Coalition's expanding influence and the dwindling success rate of Kithara hunts.
The mathematics were inexorable. If current trends continued, the hunting tradition would be extinct within a decade, and the Kithara Empire would be reduced to scattered remnants hiding in the dark corners of space. But there was another possibility, one that Chen had carefully avoided mentioning directly. If the Kithara could adapt their hunting skills to serve protective rather than predatory purposes, they might find a new role in the galaxy that preserved their essential nature while redirecting it toward constructive ends. "I'll need to speak with my crew," ZYXTHAC said finally. "Of course," Chen replied. "Take all the time you need. But don't take too long. Every day you delay means more hunting packs that we have to intercept the hard way." As ZYXTHAC was escorted back to his quarters, he found himself contemplating a future that would have been unimaginable just months earlier. The galaxy's most feared predators were being offered a chance at redemption by the very prey they had sought to hunt. The irony was almost unbearable. But, as he considered the alternatives, extinction or evolution, ZYXTHAC began to understand that the humans had given his people something the Kithara had never offered their victims: a choice. Within a week, he had made his decision. The first transmission from a Kithara hunter to the Kithara High Council in 3,000 years carried a message that would reshape galactic civilization: the hunt is over. The age of cooperation begins. The galaxy's greatest predators were about to learn what it meant to be protectors. And, at the center of it all, the humans continued to do what they had always done best: turn enemies into allies and prove that sometimes, the most dangerous predator is the one that refuses to stay prey. The hunting tradition was dead. But the Kithara species would survive, transformed by the very prey they had underestimated into something they had never imagined they could become: guardians instead of hunters, protectors instead of predators. The tables hadn't just been turned. They had been completely rebuilt.